Hi guys, my name is Nick Broughton and I am a Randomfish. Hit that subscribe button and let's all be random fishes together, shall we? So, last week I mentioned about either reviewing A Scanner Darkly, a Richard Linklater film, or a show that, frankly, I was dubious about ending, but now that I've watched it, I'm glad about its ending, and I'm glad of how it ended. And that show I want to talk about is She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. Now, originally released in the 80s, She-Ra was one of the cartoons that was released alongside the likes of He-Man, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and of course, Thundercats. Now, 3 out of 4 of those shows got dark and gritty reboots in the early 2000s, shows that I kind of grew up on. I enjoyed the dark versions of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I enjoyed He-Man. I didn't watch that much in Thundercats, but by that point I think I was more into that stuff than I was into the potential awesomeness of Thundercats, so I just stuck with those 2 shows, really. But obviously She-Ra didn't get a dark and gritty reboot, or if she did, it was very unknown and not something that we saw over here in the UK, at least not with the channels that I had access to. But in 2018, the show was brought back, and it was rebooted, under the heading of DreamWorks. And yeah, it's pretty awesome. Now, I'm not going to do a play-by-play of every single episode because, A, I'm not Brad Jones, the cinema snob, so I'm not going to do a binge-watch thing. That's just not what's going to happen here. Though I have binge-watched the whole show the entire way through because I'm just that guy now. But in 2018, the first season of She-Ra and the Princess of Power was released onto Netflix and, of course, other platforms. However, Netflix is the platform from which I watched it, so that's mainly what I'm going to be focusing on. So, what is the show? Well, I didn't watch the original 80s show, so I have no real sense of context in continuation of what the story changed and what didn't change. I can only go by what I've seen in terms of the still pictures and everything else. Everyone is slightly younger, I think, than the original 80s show, although that might just be a design feature, less of actually having them be younger. They did this in the Batman animated series. They made like some of the female villains look younger than they used to be. You know, going from Catwoman to almost being Cat college student, maybe. You know, but that's neither here nor there. Everyone is slightly youngified in this one, and that's fair enough. That was good enough to use. But the interesting thing for me came across in changes to a lot of the other characters. Subtle changes and then not so subtle changes. I get the feeling that when this show was greenlit, the writers turned around to the people at Netflix, and if you're a Sarcastic Chorus fan, then you'll know what I'm talking about. When the writers turned around to them at Netflix and said, "So, on a scale of 1 to Steven Universe, how gay do you want to make the show?" You know, because it kind of has to exist. And they decided on confirming only side characters. Hold on to that thought, because that's pretty cool in and of itself, but let's focus on the other stuff that could potentially be there. So, what else is there? Well, there's a bunch of stuff. Adora, aka She-Ra in this, is raised by the Hordak villains of this, the main villain being, of course, Hordak himself, and his army called the Horde, attempting to take over the planet of Etheria. While there, Adora is raised to believing what the Horde is doing. She is raised believing that they are the good guys, they are liberating Etheria from the control of the evil princesses. Now, of course, we get the compulsory scene of "everything I know is a lie! Oh no!" Yeah, that wasn't very good, was it? Oh well. But anyway, moving on. Adora ends up meeting up with one of the princesses called Glimmer, and her sidekick, Bo. I say sidekick, he actually does sort of present himself as just a strong character as Glimmer is, so yeah, he's not a sidekick. He appears to be a sidekick at the beginning, he really isn't. He definitely is his own character, he really is. Bo also seems to have this allergic reaction to, you know, low tops. he's always got his belly button showing, no matter what he's wearing. Which makes me think that, you know, the late 90s, early 2000s, this had been released and they all would have shared that fate. So I'm kind of glad that only Bo's really sharing that fate. I feel like he might have been born in the late 90s or early 2000s. I doubt it, but it's worth a check. Adora runs into Glimmer and Bo, and they end up becoming friends after Glimmer and Bo show Adora exactly what the Horde's been doing and how they're, you know, bringing peace and liberating Etheria from the princesses, i.e. by blowing stuff up with tanks and hurting people. But meanwhile, back at the Horde, Adora has her own set of friends. Three people called Lonnie, Kyle, and Rogelio. Now, Rogelio is a giant lizard. A humanoid lizard. All I'm going to say is thank God Spider-Man wasn't there, because that would have been very embarrassing for everyone concerned. But of course, we then get the other big character in this, Catra. Now, again, in the 80s show, I don't have much of context for this, but in the 80s show anyway, she appears to be very human and has it looks like a rip-off of Scarlet Witch. I guess the best way to really phrase her. In this version, though, they really take Catra to its own level. She's very feline-esque. She has 2 different coloured eyes. She has cat-like claws. She has cat-like agility. You know, Catra. It really lives up to her name. So that's very cool. And the best way the writers described these 2 characters, I want you to pay attention. How do they describe their relationship between these 2 characters? It's complicated. The second they said it's complicated, my brain went, okay, they either have hooked up and they're exes, or like really flirty exes, or they're going to hook up by the end of the show. It's gonna happen. Like, the way it was described by the writers are going, yeah, that's just obvious to people. That really is. If that had been made public knowledge, that would have been obvious to everyone. But like I said, they're pretty much only confirming side characters at the moment. They left it deliberately ambiguous, I guess. I'll get more into that when we get to the finale of the show, actually. I want to talk about a theory that I had very briefly but at the end of that. But anyway, after Adora leaves the Horde and joins the princesses in the rebellion against this, Catra is given the chance to join her. And Catra, in possibly the most interesting sight of bad guys being bad guys, she refuses to join Adora simply because she wants to have a place. She wants to have her place. She wants to be able to stay with the Horde and have this power and everything else that Adora seems to be rejecting. Catra does this brilliant thing throughout the whole show where she digs herself deeper and deeper into this hole that she's trying to double down on her reasonings as to why she's not joined Adora or why she is staying with the Horde or within these kind of abusive worlds that she's living in. And, you know, like I said, she just digs the hole deeper and deeper to the point where everyone just is like, oh, Catra, oh, sweetie, you should really think these things through. Ouch. Oh dear, that's not good. But hey, that's neither here nor there at this point. So, with Adora's change to the rebellion, Glimmer then comes up with a brilliant idea that she shows to her mother, the Queen Angela, who seems to, as the name would imply, has angel wings and can fly around and has mystical powers and all this sort of thing. You have several what's called runestones scattered throughout the planet of Etheria, that gives the various princesses across the planet their various powers. So you have Glimmer and Angela connected to what's called the Moonstone. And I'm not sure about every name of every possible one, you know, so I'm only going to name the ones that I can truly I know for a fact they're called that. The Moonstone and the Black Garnet are unfortunately the only 2 that I know, and the Black Garnet is with the Horde, which I will explain in a moment. The other runestones scattered throughout it are all linked to different princesses, which Glimmer, Bo, and Adora, now She-Ra, because she gains the sword that transforms her into She-Ra, And she still does it with the same phrasing for the honor of Grayskull. She raises the sword up and she transforms. It's all lovely jubbly, and it's all brilliant. And she's, she goes from having longish blonde hair to having what can only be described as hair that would make 80s heavy metal bands go, whoa, that's a lot of hair. I'm serious. It's kind of entertaining. But then they go off and they search for these other princesses, trying to bring them to the rebellion to reignite what's called the Princess Alliance, which Angela and her husband, and Glimmer's father, a guy called Micah, tried to do once before, and then after Micah's death, the alliance fell apart, and Angela went back to running the rebellion almost by herself, while the other princesses went off and did their own thing in their kingdoms. They then had children who now have taken over these responsibilities. However, they end up talking to various people of the princess persuasion, up to and including the likes of Mermista, Perfumer, Froster, and of course what we would end up getting is Entraptor, who doesn't really have magic, but she is obsessed with technology. She's kind of like a hyperactive version of Sheldon. And I do mean this in a lot of ways, although I get the feeling that if she ever met Sheldon Cooper, he would have more disdain for her than she would for him. She'd probably think he was a robot and go nuts over it. Like, this is the kind of character who, when she sees Richard Daniel, she goes, oh, you are gorgeous! Oh my god, I want to find out how you work! Ah! And she loves it. She loves all of it. And it's highly adorable and yet so frustrating because you're trying to get stuff done and she's just not paying attention and But anyway, throughout all of this, various things happen, including another character that I failed to mention before. But she has more moments towards the end of the season and most of season 2 actually. A character called Shadow Weaver. Now she is essentially the go-between between Adora and Catra when they were in the Horde, or Catra now that she's in the Horde and running things basically, and the big bad Hordak. Now Shadow Weaver is essentially the abusive mother figure. She put all her love and attention on Adora, trying to make her more, fit for being Force Captain, or eventually being fit to take over from Shadow Weaver one day in the future. For Catra, on the other hand, she shows basically nothing but disdain and hatred for her. Actually going so far as to emotionally manipulate her at times, telling her that she's worthless, that the only reason why Catra ever became a Force Captain within the Horde was because Adora left without taking the position, took the position and then left. Like, there was an opening, that was it. You would eventually then get Hordak finally sort of laying down the law with Shadow Weaver, saying, look, this girl has essentially done more for us and more for me and my cause in this whole thing than you have in years. She's got the go-ahead to do whatever the hell she wants. And during a mission to which Glimmer and Bo end up being captured by the Horde, and Shadow Weaver is torturing Glimmer in order to try and get Angela to surrender and become the Horde's prisoner, whereupon they'd let Glimmer go, although I severely doubt it. Throughout all of this, the princess is going to rescue them, and Entraptor accidentally gets left behind. They think she's dead, and so they leave very upset, very forlorn. It's a very sad moment, and the princesses end up splitting up because of this. Because they sit there and go, Entraptor might be dead. Like, Entraptor's dead. Why are we still fighting this war when Entraptor is dead and we barely got out of there? And all this sort of thing. Is it really worth it? And they go back to their own kingdoms and they don't really give a monkeys. And all this sort of thing. And Entraptor, it turns out, is alive, and she's been living in the air duct system within the Horde's main base, what's called the Fright Zone. And she ends up remodeling and befriending a robot that she names Emily, which I think is hilarious. And eventually she gets discovered by Catra and another Force Captain in this called Scorpia. Now, remember when I said that the Horde had the Black Garnet, one of the other runestones on the planet? All the runestones are connected to various princesses. That's Scorpia. Now, Scorpia is the least looking like a princess that you would possibly get, i.e. the way princesses have been portrayed over the years. Scorpia is almost a complete 180 from that, and I love that that's in there. She's also one of the sweetest people you'll ever meet in your life. I mean, I swear Scorpia is the type of person that could give you tooth, cause your teeth to rot. She's so sweet, it's ridiculous. But Scorpia and Catra obviously become, well, Scorpia believes them to be friends. Catra sort of sees her more as a stepping stone to something greater, I think. That's another one of Catra's major failings within the show. The people that are actually on her side, she almost tosses them aside like bad rubbish. It's awful. But anyway, once Entraptor is found by Catra and Scorpia, Catra then says to Entraptor, well, they've left you, they've clearly abandoned you, come and work for us instead. So Entraptor does do this, and like I said, this is when Hordak very much lays down the law with Shadow Weaver. He sits there and goes, this girl has essentially brought in a princess who knows technology, who can enhance our weapons using the Black Garnet that you have been selfishly using for your own power for years now. She's done more to further my cause than you have in ages. So, frankly, the supposed failure in your eyes, the forgotten princess and the crazy tech weirdo can do whatever the hell they like. I don't care. You're basically on thin ice. He's basically the Shadow Weaver. And Shadow Weaver, of course, does not take this lying down. She starts screaming. She goes, you will not take this power from me. Starts trying to take all the power from herself. And Catra eventually, knocks this crystal that was in her mask out of her head and causes her to, be locked away because she's lost all of her power and she's no longer able to control Catra through fear, which was the main reason as to why I think those two sort of worked as characters, if you will. We then there's obviously then this big finale that involves a friendship is magic moment. The princesses obviously all come back and the Princess Alliance is reborn and blah, 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 blah. Entraptor and Hordak begin to collaborate in trying to figure out how to open up a portal. Because that's what Hordak is trying to do himself. He's trying to open a portal. And no one knows why. And he then reveals this to Entraptor because we then get to possibly what I think is one of the slightly less than cool decisions that this show made. I don't deny that some people will think this decision was good, but for me, I'm sitting there going, no, this doesn't feel right, this doesn't work, at least not to me. It's revealed that Hordak is a clone, that he's an effective clone, essentially speaking, and that the planet that he's on is, he's trying to take it through a portal using the magic and science of the planet and technology left behind by another race that used to live on the planet called the First Ones, which then end up sort of taking, can pull the planet back through and reunite Hordak with the guy who he's cloned from called Horde Prime. This decision, unfortunately for me, took away from Hordak. Now, I have nothing against one bad being replaced by another bad, but I know that we really shouldn't be using He-Man to compare to She-Ra, despite the fact that these two shows are meant to be linked in some way, but I want to just look back on the 2002-2003 He-Man show just for a second here. In this show, Skeletor at one point is completely deposed. He and his minions are taken out by another set of villains called King Hiss and the Snake Men. Stupid names, I know, but listen, hear me out. Evil Lyn, one of Skeletor's henchmen, betrays him to the Snake Men, and King Hiss then has Skeletor essentially eaten by his snakes. Because where Skeletor's been hiding is Snake Mountain. So King Hiss can sit back and go, this is my castle, this is my domain, what do you think you're doing here, blah, 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 blah. But after King Hiss is defeated, Skeletor comes back. and he is still the bad guy. Nothing was taken away from him as a villain. He was momentarily, taken out because of Evil Lynn's betrayal, if nothing else. And Skeletor just did not like this. And there are consequences for that character later on down the line. In She-Ra, I'm sorry to say, Hordak goes from being a imposing and slightly scary villain to becoming essentially emo Peter in Spider-Man 3. He kind of goes from being a badass to being a whiny ass. And I'm sorry, I just couldn't take Hordak seriously after that. I just couldn't. And I know that's bad, and quite possibly, if you disagree with me, that's fine. Feel free to tell me how wrong I am in the comments. It really doesn't matter to me, because at this point in my life, I'm watching this, and I don't like it when villains' darker natures are taken away from them in place of deep emotional story arcs. Especially a character like that. If a character's already been established to being conflicted, or having a much nicer or better nature, then that's fine. But if you're going to establish them as badass, keep them badass. Don't take away from the badassness too much. Another reference I could almost make for this is in Power Rangers, in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Lord Zed is brought in Season 2 to be the next big bad, and he is dark and imposing and he's threatening and everything else. And I think it's in the 3rd season. Rita then gives him a potion that makes him fall in love with her so he can't ever destroy her, and they get married. And they join forces, basically to destroy the Rangers. Now, that did not take away completely from Lord Zed's badassness, because while it did make him more comedic, i.e. making him more linked with Rita in terms of them actually being more of a squabbling couple, it didn't take away from his imposingness. It didn't take it away from anything else. In the 3rd season, there's a scene where he is taken into the Ranger's cave where they allow him to enter the power chamber, and he is still scary as hell. Hordak's scariness got taken away the second the cool-looking suit he was wearing was taken away in place of this, non-sleeving armor that shows like his pathetically thin arms and his little veins that come all the way down the side. And, his hair goes from being, slightly slicked back and looking slightly cooler to being almost, like I said, almost more like a mohawk or like I said, emo fringe down there. No, stop that. I have nothing against villains being given emotion. What I take an issue with is when you give them so much emotion, you stop them being bad guys. Like I said, I have nothing against that sort of thing happening. But when the villain isn't already shown to be conflicted in some way, shape, or form, it doesn't bode well for the villain. It really doesn't. But anyway, moving on. Since all this happened, She-Ra obviously also is trying to get a handle on her powers, and she meets up with the computer from the first ones, from the previous She-Ra that used to exist on the planet, a girl called Mara. The program is called Light Hope, and it's trying to teach her how to use her powers effectively and how to, quote-unquote, balance the planet. Throughout all of this, we then learn about other stuff that Light Hope had planned and blah, 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 and let's just say villains are villains. All the way through. Let's just go with that. We get some more stuff about... we then get two other points that I want to make before we get into the darker halves of the seasons. Scorpia and Catra end up having to go into the desert sometime later when Entraptor sort of sticks up for Catra and says, either you keep Catra around or I'm leaving you, Hordak. And Hordak goes, fine, whatever. And the two of them go off and they do their own thing. And we get little hints scattered throughout the show very quickly that Scorpia's exact line is she's saying she wants to be a good friend, the best friend that she can possibly be. But the way she acts around Catra, it made me realise, or it made me think anyway, that I think that Scorpia definitely had a crush on Catra at one point or another. And that will lead me again back into my theory that I'm going to propose a little bit later on. But right now, the two of them have essentially a very one-sided relationship, i.e. Scorpia constantly trying to put all the effort in and Catra walking away because all she cares about is one-upping Adora. That is it. And that's really all you need to know for that season, if I'm going to be quite honest with you. We do get the portal trying to be opened and it nearly destroys the world. And we do get a very cool moment between Adora and Catra when they're fighting at the end. When Catra's saying, you know, all this is your fault, you did this to me, blah, blah, blah. And Adora finally gives in and gives her this beatdown / mini speech doing this whole, I didn't make you do this, you made your choice, now live with it. Punch! Right in the face, she's down. Done. Dusted. We then also get the next one, which is Angela ends up sacrificing herself to put the world to rights after the portal's been opened. And all this sort of stuff that gets thrown in and around. Angela ends up being destroyed, or as Netflix and DreamWorks like to call it, she's gone. Or she's not here. People, you can say dead. You can say it. Now, I understand that it's entirely possible that she wasn't technically dead or whatever, but let's face it, for these characters right now, she's dead. Season 4, we see Glimmer become queen. We then see some serious cracks in her and Bo's friendship, along with all of that sort of stuff. We also then get more references. We've seen references to the whole thing, and the reason why I haven't brought this up is that I want to talk about this very briefly. Is in a couple of episodes we've had references to other characters, side characters, who are confirmed to be gay. And I bring this up in Season 4 because this is where we get the last real puzzle piece of this with Scorpia. We see that Scorpia's parents were definitely two women. Or two men, possibly. I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head, but I think it's two women. Her parents were gay. We see that Bo's parents are, you know, he has both dads. So, you know, that's a positive gay couple, which is very cool. And, of course, we then get the other one, which is a big one. Two of the princesses that are already part of the rebellion, called Netossa and Spinnerella. Now, Netossa can throw nets. Clearly. And the other one, she can control air. She could give Aang a run for his money. That's how powerful she is, really. So we then get various revelations across the season, up to and including Scorpia leaving the Horde because she realizes that Catra's a bad friend, and that all she really wants is to cover up her mistake and destroy everyone and everything. She doesn't think she needs anybody and all this sort of thing. We get the introduction of the best character in the whole of Season 4, Double Trouble. A character that can, a shapeshifter that can turn into anyone, anything at any time. Very cool, and frankly, he constantly uses the word darling whenever he talks. Makes me kind of wish that Tim Curry had played Double Trouble for some weird reason. I don't know why, I just do. We would eventually then get various other things happening, such as talking about the Heart of Etheria, which is what's meant to be something that She-Ra can unlock eventually, with all the princesses having balance to balance the planet, all being connected to their runestones. Now Scorpia ends up going to the Resistance and saying, I need your help to save Entraptor. Now this is where it gets big, because all the way throughout the season, Glimmer and Adora have been kind of feuding. Because Glimmer is making all these decisions that basically involve using Adora as bait. Glimmer feels that Adora is attempting to make her less, or trying to take all the decisions away from her. Adora's just feeling less like a good friend and more like a usable object at this point. Glimmer is most definitely more slappable in this season than she's ever been before. It's constant, it really is. But there is a moment when they talk about trying to use the Heart of Etheria. Oh, and by this point, Shadow Weaver in Season 3 has left the Horde and has gone back to the Rebellion herself, because now she wants to worm her way back into Adora's life for some strange reason. That's what everyone else is saying. But in this season, Adora knows that Shadow Weaver is being a pain in the ass, but Shadow Weaver is apparently teaching magic to Glimmer, so Glimmer thinks that she's fine. What? What? When did this happen? Fuck! No! No, stop it! That's just... I hate bringing up stuff like that because it really... Part of the reason as to why I don't like Glimmer in that season. It's fun as hell to not like her, but it's annoying. But near the end of all this, Shadow Weaver has basically been saying that they should use the Heart of Etheria's power for themselves in order to defeat Hordak and to stop them from connecting to Horde Prime and eventually bringing the rest of the Horde down on them. Trying to take out the Horde once and for all. Glimmer, of course, wants to do the same thing as well, but Bo and Adora both know the problems with using the Heart of Etheria, because if they do that, then everyone on the planet could potentially be destroyed. This is thanks to, in a previous story involving Mara, and a message that she left behind for the future She-Ra, aka Adora, because she knows that Adora is coming. Through essentially the Yoda of the series, a character called Madame Raz. She's barely in the thing, she's there to drop some exposition sometimes. That's kind of how I feel about this sort of show. I don't really talk about Raz because Raz sort of just appears and then disappears, and I'm like, okay, whatever. But after all of this, Glimmer wants to use the heart, Shadow Weaver wants to use the heart, Adora and Bo say it's not going to happen. They want to go to a place far off called Beast Island, where Entraptor is believed to be, thanks to Scorpia, and they're going to rescue her in order to find a way to destabilize the heart so that it can't be used in any way, shape or form. At least in that respect, the people on the planet won't get destroyed. Like, it won't cause a planetary level extinction event. But Glimmer is of course blind to all of this because she feels like Adora's trying to take control away from her. And so she tries to use her feelings tries to use Bo's, her friendship with Bo to essentially manipulate him into agreeing with her. And Bo calls her out and says, "You're being stupid. You're wrong. This isn't how it's supposed to go." Glimmer says, "Yeah, but I'm still queen, so screw you guys. We're going to do things my way." Adora and Bo say, "Nope." And they get on a ship and they fly away to Beast Island. They get to Beast Island, they find Entraptor, but they also find another character. Bum bum bum! Glimmer's dad is back. Yep. So they kill off one parent, but they already killed off the first one. So what do you do when you kill off both parents? You bring one back by saying he's not really dead. Hey! Hey! What? Forget it. Mike is cool, he's weird, he's a little kooky when you first meet him, but it's kind of cool to see. They get Entraptor and Micah out of there and they fly back. On the way back, however, they then discover that Glimmer has been talking to Scorpia and she takes her to the Horde. In the Horde, they then reconnect her to the Black Garnet so that all the runestones can be connected, because Glimmer tried to have a talk with Light Hope about it, and of course Light Hope goes, "Of course, I'll tell you exactly how to use the weapon, because that's what I want really as well, so it's fine." More on Glimmer, essentially speaking. All the hearts are activated, the place is balanced, blah blah blah, and it turns out that She-Ra is more than just the protector of Etheria. It turns out that she also happens to be the conduit to which the Heart of Etheria, the weapon, actually fires through. Well, isn't that convenient? And in a display of ultimately defying the first ones and their tech and everything that apparently they were meant to be doing, i.e. creating this weapon in the first place, she shatters the sword in a vague attempt to undermine their authority. Light Hope's programming at this point, because she had recently, because beforehand with Mara, she had developed a personality and all this sort of thing, but then the programming took over again, and when it got to Adora, Light Hope was basically half reprogrammed, half not. So that's kind of where a lot of it came from. However, in Season 5, we finally get to Season 5, we get a whole bunch of revelations. The other three characters that they knew from the Horde, Lonnie, Kyle, and Rogelio. Kyle and Rogelio, this was theorized by another YouTuber, which I think was absolutely brilliant because he was completely on the money. So, sarcastic chorus, well done. Kyle and Rogelio are in fact a couple, and they end up sort of doing their thing at some point, which I think is quite funny, although you don't actually see them being a couple, which is kind of depressing. It's just said off, they said they did this stuff off screen. I'm like, come on. At least show them together. Show how awkward that would be. I'm sorry, that's just hilarious. We then, of course, get various revelations. Netossa and Spinnerella actually do get a lot more stuff to do in this season, which I like, bringing that couple forward and front and center, which is good. Horde Prime, of course, turns up and completely devastates Hordak, because Horde Prime can control people. He's like a hive mind. So, he's essentially Ultron and Brainiac. Okay. He looks cool. I'll give him that. He looks like a villain. He's like he's got white dreadlocks, almost like the failed agents in Matrix Reloaded. You know the ones I'm talking about. Though we are getting aggravated, guys. But anyway, Horde Prime essentially wants to use the Heart of Etheria himself. Glimmer realizes what a complete idiotic move that she made by doing that, and all this sort of thing. And throughout various setups of the whole thing, Catra and Adora are reunited along with Glimmer and Bo and Adora as well. And the four of them form their own little group because Catra then decides, I want to do something good with my life for once. Because at the end of Season 4, another thing that was kind of cool that I have to say, because while Bo very much gave Glimmer a talking to, Double Trouble ends up giving Catra a talking to, because he sits there and goes, you think all these people hurt you, but did you think that perhaps maybe it's you that's the screw up for once? Which, of course, leaves Catra in a very devastated state, which was perfect, because that gave her the room for her redemption arc throughout the last part of the season. So fine, I'm good with that. So again, throughout that last season, we, of course, get Catra's redemption arc. Horde Prime... When I called him Ultron and Brainiac, I did actually mean it, because he takes over the minds of a load of the characters, including the powerful sorcerer Micah, Mermista, the Water Princess, and Scorpio as well, and Spinnerella, which was kind of devastating. It's kind of scary and sad, and I don't like it, and oh my god, I don't like it. Entraptor then figures out how to take out the discs, or figures out that taking out the discs, the longer they stay in there, it's harder to sort of deactivate it and all this sort of thing. They end up, Adora and Catra and Glimmer and Bo, they've gone off on their own little side quest because Adora and Bo went off to rescue Glimmer, and then eventually rescue Catra as well from Horde Prime, who had kidnapped them previously. And on the way back, they gain various bits of knowledge about how to defeat Horde Prime. They get back. They have to defeat Spinnerella and get the chip out of the back of her neck, which it seems to me to be very Sontaran. I'm just saying. For those of you who've watched Doctor Who, get the reference, please. But then we get obviously the massive fight between Horde Prime and the others, and blah blah blah. But then we get to the bits that I want to talk about is simply this. We obviously then get very clearly and very obviously the scenes between Catra and Adora, where Catra finally breaks down and says, "You are such an idiot, I love you." And Adora says, "I love you too." And they kiss, and it's all lovely jubbly. And you finally get the two main characters obviously being romantically linked, and it's all lovely and happy, and yay for the representation within this show. That's something I have to say. The representation in this show is first rate. It's great. It's wonderful to witness. It really is. But here's where my imagination kind of screwed me over. Obviously, as you've seen through my Randomfish rewrites that I've done on this channel, I very much like to rewrite things in my own head. Not because I don't like what's been done, but because I think to myself, but what if we did it like this? This could be kind of cool, and what would you do if you did this with this? And it's all interesting. To me, my imagination very much screwed me over because it gave me this possibility, because Scorpia and Catra were very much friends, and Scorpia wanted more than that from Catra. And I know the Catra-Adora relationship was set up ages before the Scorpia and Catra relationship was, but there is a part of me that wishes that at the end of the show, Adora either had died or had been or was unable to do much else, or was unable to do a lot of stuff, or just didn't want to do something, or just didn't feel the same way, as it were, ultimately leading to Catra and Scorpia getting together. Because I'm sorry, Scorpia brought out the best in Catra. She really did. Adora and Catra are very similar, I'll give you that, in terms of their personalities. They're very well linked, they're very well suited, and I don't mind that at all. But to me, I don't know, I guess Scorpia kind of brought out a better nature to Catra in a way. Or at least, you know, made things better for her in some way. I just thought that's the way it was. But again, this does not take away, at least as far as I'm concerned, I don't lose anything for the Adora-Catra relationship, Adora and Catra getting together. That's fine for me. We do get a I love you from Glimmer and Bow, which I will not say came out of nowhere, because they are friends and they have been friends for a while, and it is sort of indicated a lot of the time that there is a lot of flirtation and a lot of chemistry between them. So that doesn't overly bother me. What does bother me is what happens to Hordak. Throughout Season 5, Hordak has been essentially a clone of Hall Prime. He has been sitting around and just responding to Hall Prime's commands. Essentially, when Hall Prime takes a clone, or like has a clone or something of himself as a servant, they are essentially a blank slate, always praising the glory of Prime. That is it. If Optimus Prime heard this, he'd kill himself. Hall Prime is an insult to Primes everywhere, damn it. Anyway, but the idea was that Hordak became one of Hall Prime's servants at the end of Season 4 again, because Hall Prime learns of Hordak's failure of trying to conquer Etheria, which is what leads him to wanting to conquer Etheria himself, so as to eliminate his clone, or his brother as he calls him, eliminate his brother's failure. But Hordak, we then get a scene later on, near the end of the show, where Hordak breaks his programming because of something that he talks to Entraptor about. And Entraptor sort of reminds him of who he is, and he starts having memory flashes of what he used to be. And he picks up Hall Prime and, very Return of the Jedi-esque, throws him down a shaft, or at least throws him into a black abyss. But Hall Prime, of course, being linked to all his clones, merely takes over Hordak's body and becomes the new... And Hordak's body sort of becomes Hall Prime's new base of operations, as you will. However, after Hall Prime is defeated and destroyed by Adora and all the others, we then get something even more interesting. We then get Hordak being brought back to his normal self, but then we see him and Entraptor talking as if they've always been this happy couple. And while I understand that Hordak and Entraptor do care for each other, and I have nothing against that, Hordak was still a bad guy. Stop doing this, people. Stop. I don't care if the bad guy does something really good at the end. He was still a bully and a bad guy. Stop making me try to feel bad for him or feel nice for him upon, like, his return into the world. You did this with Snape in the last Harry Potter film. Stop it. That's not what needs to happen here. But this, of course, then leads into, what do I think of the show as a whole? It's amazing. It's funny, it's witty, the action is unique, the animation is fun, the characters, the voice actors are phenomenal. The designs are incredible. Everything about this show makes it brilliant and makes it a lot more fun. So frankly, I will always recommend watching She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. So go find it on YouTube. If I believe it's on CBBC, I was browsing through my TV channels and I saw it there completely by accident randomly. Check it out on Netflix, as I've always seen it. And of course, wherever else you can get a hold of it, really. That's sort of where it all comes from for me. But seriously, check out She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. It's an incredible show. If you haven't already been turned off by this by listening to my half-baked explanations of the plot, I really try to only hit the major points of the plot, as it were. But you know what? Check it out for yourself. It's a lot of fun. It's really cool. Go ahead and check it out. Now, as for what I'm going to review next week, I held it off this week because of the last season of She-Ra. So, next week I'm going to review A Scanner Darkly. Let's see what Richard Linklater can offer us. Let's go from adequate representation of all genders and all sexualities to a representation of a future that, quite frankly, I feel like we could almost be living in already. Kinda messed up, but what are you gonna do? Randomfish out.